A crushing defeat for Labour as the Conservatives sweep to victory in the Hartlepool by-election with a majority of nearly 7,000.
Jill Mortimer, Conservative Party candidate, 15,529.
Jill Mortimer is the first Tory MP for the town since the constituency was created in 1974. The Prime Minister says it's a good result.
Very encouraging set of results so far, and I think that's really because we've been focusing as government on our priorities, people's priorities.
It's a blow for Labour's leader Sir Keir Starmer. One former minister says the party has a lot of work to do.
Until we have made it absolutely irrevocably clear that we have changed, that we have moved on, that we are not that sort of Labour Party anymore, I'm not sure whether those absolutely respectable working class voters who were our bedrock for New Labour are going to forgive us and are going to come back to us.
Counting is underway in Wales and Scotland, where all the seats in the Senedd and Parliament are up for grabs. With votes still being counted in many contests, we'll have the very latest from our correspondents. Also this lunchtime. Everyone under 40 will be offered an alternative to the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine, though experts stress there are no new safety concerns. And holiday hopes. The overseas travel list is due to be released by the government in the next few hours.
Stay with us on the BBC News Channel for all the election results still to come across Scotland, Wales and England, and analysis of what they mean from our team of experts.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. The Conservatives have won a resounding victory in the Hartlepool by-election, taking the seat from Labour with a majority of nearly 7,000. It's the first time the area has had a Tory MP since the constituency was created in 1974. The result, a swing of 16%, is a blow for the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, with some MPs on the left of the party calling for a change in strategy. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has described the early election results as very encouraging, adding that it's because the government has been focusing on what he called the people's priorities and bouncing back from the pandemic as much as we can. Our political correspondent, Chris Mason, has our first report.
A new look for Hartlepool at Groomingdale's pet salon, dog trimming and election musing this morning.
I reckon overall I think it's actually good. It's a bit of a change for our town.
Sounds like the dog approves as well.
I think she does.
Gillian Wendy Mortimer, commonly known as Jill Mortimer, Conservative Party candidate, 15,529.
At just after 7 o'clock this morning, for the first time since 1964, Hartlepool had a Conservative MP.
I'm incredibly proud of the campaign my team and I have run in Hartlepool. It's based on local issues of real concern to the community here. And I would like to thank all of the people of this great town who've responded so positively to it. I'm also immensely proud to be the first Conservative MP in Hartlepool for 57 years. Not only that, I am the first woman ever to be elected as MP for this town.
Down the road from the pet salon, the cafe, and more reflections on the town turning blue.
It's first time for a few years, isn't it? Yeah, I'm all right with it, eh?
I am. I think because Labour's just let you down.
Hope they can do some good.
Yeah. I don't mind Boris. I mean, it's okay. Yeah. So, did you vote Conservative? I did.
And as the political map is repainted, so is the car park.
I think Boris has done a good job with what he's done so far, so I think that's why everyone's voted for him, to be honest. Labour just seems to be going down and down, and they have done for a while, to be honest. So hopefully it's onwards and upwards.
For the Conservatives then, a great start to this weekend of election results.
I know that the results have been coming in since this morning, and clearly a lot more to go, and it's early days, but a very encouraging set of results so far. And I think that's really because we've been focusing as government on our priorities, people's priorities, bouncing back from the pandemic as far as we can, getting through it.
For Labour, the result here is crushing.
For Labour to rebuild that trust, we've got to reinstil that party of work and working people and be the champions of that. And that's very clearly the path that Keir Starmer is setting out. But we've always been very clear that this is a long project. It will take time to rebuild that trust and that reconnection.
More than 8,000 people here did vote Labour, but nearly double voted Conservative. Labour had hoped they'd hit rock bottom at the last general election, their worst result since 1935. But this result suggests they could fall further. This by-election doesn't change the maths much at Westminster, but it may well change the mood. Chris Mason, BBC News in Hartlepool.
Well, let's get the very latest picture. Let's head to Lewis Goodall for that.
Yes, Jane, let's just reflect a little bit on that Hartlepool result. Look at that, 52% there for the Conservatives. It's the sort of result that they couldn't have dreamed of only a few years ago. They've essentially doubled their vote. It translated to a majority of 6,940, and what will send shivers down the spines of those in Labour HQ today and Labour MPs is this. Look at how they did it. They added 23 points to their result, and mainly they extracted that from what we've got on there as the Reform Party, but of course it's not the Reform Party. That used to be the Brexit Party. They've basically just absorbed that wholesale and taken a bit of the Labour vote as well. The big worry for the Labour Party in the coming months and years is there are a lot of other seats, 37 other seats like Hartlepool, parliamentary seats, that have big Brexit Party votes that the Conservatives could absorb, and that those votes are actually bigger than the Labour majority in those seats. So seats like Doncaster, Ed Miliband's seat, or Pontefract, Yvette Cooper's seat, all very seriously at risk. And then, of course, as we know, it isn't just about the parliamentary situation either, it's also about the local elections. And this is all about what's going on here now. We can see here in Hartlepool, and we can see, oh, well, the situation effectively is that there is a very big, stark situation going on across the country in terms of Labour seats and Labour parliamentary seats and Labour councils. Lots of Labour councils really, really suffering at the moment. And as a result of that, the Conservatives basically embedding in there, taking more and more Labour votes, more and more Labour seats. It wouldn't just be a problem. If it was just Hartlepool for the Labour Party, that would be one thing. But the fact is we're seeing across the country in seat after seat after seat, in council after council after council, the Labour regressing, the Conservatives on the advance. And that is going to give the Labour Party a great deal of concern, cause them a great deal of concern over the course of the day and coming days as well.
All right, thank you for now. Well, as Lewis is reflecting there, it's been a bad night for Labour. One shadow minister calling the result in Hartlepool absolutely shattering. It increases the pressure on leader Sir Keir Starmer. Lord Mandelson said he felt mild fury about Labour's direction over the last 10 years. On the other side of the party, the Unite leader, Len McCluskey, urged Labour to pursue a radical agenda, saying no one knows what the party stands for anymore. Ian Watson reports.
It wasn't just in Hartlepool, where Labour supporters had long faces. In Harlow, in south east England, the party lost control of the council. In Dudley, in the Midlands, the scale of Conservative gains, 12 seats in all, sunk in. And in Sunderland, while Labour kept control of the council, some voters moved away, with the Conservatives and Lib Dems moving forward.
To those who have turned away from Labour, I say this: we hear you.
But are voters listening to him? Last year, Keir Starmer promised new leadership. Some in his party are now questioning his leadership. But his supporters say it's the party, not the leader, that has to change.
I'm very comfortable that we now have a leader that the country could see as an alternative Prime Minister. The problem is the Labour Party itself. We have not yet changed the Labour Party enough for people to feel able to go out and trust it with their and their children's futures.
And this former MP for Hartlepool says the party now has to move further away from the Jeremy Corbyn era.
He casts a long shadow still over the Labour Party, and until we have made it absolutely irrevocably clear that we have changed, that we have moved on, that we are not that sort of Labour Party anymore, I'm not sure whether those absolutely respectable working class voters who were our bedrock for New Labour are going to forgive us and are going to come back to us.
Keir Starmer is expected to ring the changes in his top team, his shadow cabinet, before too long. But some senior figures in his party say that it is he himself who has to change. They tell us they think his message has been too bland, too vanilla, and yes, too boring. And some are urging him, and I quote, to incinerate the politics of the far left. But the left are not for burning. They're turning their fire on Keir Starmer.
But I do think that the Labour Party failed to communicate effectively in the last year about what we actually believe in. And that, you know, of course, is with the leadership of the Labour Party.
He said he wanted to make the moral case for socialism. He wanted a united party. And unfortunately, he's failed in all of those areas.
Labour's challenge at the ballot box clearly can't be solved by new leadership alone. It's likely there will now be a clearer sense of direction. But in the process, divisions will become clearer too. Ian Watson, BBC News.
And our chief political correspondent Adam Fleming is at Westminster. Adam, how much of all of this is about Brexit?
Afternoon to you, Jane. Yes, Brexit did play a part in this because, as we've been hearing, lots of people in Hartlepool who voted for the Brexit Party at the last general election in 2019 decided to vote for the Tory Party this time rather than going back to the Labour Party where they may have been historically. But it was also pledges by the government of more jobs and investment in the northeast of England, which will have swung it as well. But you can also say similar things for lots of the results of the English local council elections that have been coming in through the morning, where you see the Conservatives making gains and Labour losing councillors, not just in the north of England, but also in the Midlands and in the south of England as well. And at this stage in the political cycle, you would expect the opposition party to be winning things, especially when they're up against a political party that's been in power for something like 11 years. And also, they're doing badly in places where they would need to win if it was a general election and Labour was going to be the next government. Now, we have not heard from Keir Starmer yet. He left his house with a load of cameras around him and he didn't say anything. But when you speak to sources close to him, they say he is not ducking responsibility for this and that he has to just go further and faster with his plan to change the party, which enrages some members of his party.
Adam Fleming, thank you. Well, counting is underway in Scotland, but a fuller picture of the parliamentary vote isn't expected until tomorrow. The SNP is hoping for a majority to bolster its case for another independence referendum. Our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon reports.
A nighttime delivery of ballot boxes from Scotland's islands. Familiar election images in a campaign that has been anything but. COVID meant there was no overnight tallying of the vote and now a much slower count. The SNP are hoping to win a fourth consecutive term and say if there is a pro-independence majority, they'll push ahead with plans for a post-pandemic referendum.
If a majority of MSPs are elected with independence and a referendum in their manifesto, and they then vote that through the Parliament, that is a mandate, and it will be the people of Scotland that have the final say, not Boris Johnson.
There were queues outside some polling stations. This voter didn't get inside to cast his vote until after 10 o'clock when polls officially closed.
You're trying to turn Scotland into a socialist republic.
Polling day drama included this confrontation in Glasgow, during which Nicola Sturgeon made her views known.
You're a fascist, you are a racist, and the south side of Glasgow will reject you.
Of course they will, because we're a new party.
The other big parties in Scotland look to have been fighting it out for second place.
I've been speaking to thousands of voters over the last few days, and not a single person has mentioned the word Boris Johnson. What they're far more interested in is what's happening up here in Scotland.
And Sawar, as our new leader, has literally been in post for 10 weeks. We started at 14% in the polls. There was even talk of the Greens overtaking us, and now I think we have improved that position substantially.
Physical distance for those collating the vote and those watching, including the former First Minister Alex Salmond, who is hoping his new party, Alba, will break through. The regional results won't become known until tomorrow, but the Constitution dominated the campaign And if there is a majority for independence in this Parliament, that is likely to continue. Lorna Gordon, BBC News, Edinburgh.
Well, let's go to Holyrood and join our political correspondent Nick Eardley. Nick, what should we be looking out for in the next few hours?
Well, Jane, in the last few minutes we've had the first result, the Liberal Democrats holding Orkney. Not a great surprise, that's a pretty safe seat for them. But when it comes to the first past the post constituencies, the SNP need to pick a few up if they are going to win an overall majority. And it seems to be coming down to a battle between two things. Whether the SNP have got enough of their vote out in those crucial seats that they're targeting versus whether the unionist parties have managed to coalesce around one candidate, i.e. has there been tactical voting for the best person who's not the SNP for those voters. Now, an SNP majority, even if it doesn't happen, won't stop talk about independence if they still have a majority with the Greens. But be under no illusions, if the SNP win a majority, that case is strengthened.
Nick Eardley, thank you. Well, counting has also begun in Wales. The final makeup of the 60 politicians who sit in the Senedd should be known by the end of today. Our Wales correspondent Thomas Morgan reports.
Counting underway under a different set of circumstances. COVID-19 has meant that this time it's a daytime task rather than overnight. And social distancing restrictions at polling stations meant that some had to queue up for over an hour to cast their vote last night. Despite never having a clear majority, Welsh Labour have been in power since the Senedd began over 2 decades ago. And leader Mark Drakeford will hope that his handling of the pandemic will be enough to convince voters to stick with him. In 2019, a few seats fell to the Conservatives at the general election. They will hope to chip away again into Labour's dominance, especially in the North East Red Wall marginal seats. Plaid Cymru will hope a pledge for an independence referendum can sway some of the public, whilst the Liberal Democrats are fighting for survival again in Wales after being wiped out 2 years ago. In the last election in 2016, UKIP won 7 seats in the weeks prior to Wales voting to leave the EU.
Well, I think one of the things that's going to be interesting is whether the UKIP vote goes to the Tories as we've seen in the English elections today. So will Wales replicate what has happened in England?
Abolishing the Senedd is another sentiment pushed by some of the other parties, looking to gain a few of the closely contested regional seats. And this year marks the first time 16 and 17-year-olds can vote. And in an election where small margins matter, could they make a difference?
After a year in which the home nation leaders have been thrust into the spotlight, many could be forgiven that this vote would be solely down to the government's handling of the pandemic and whether or not the Welsh public want to stick with the status quo or want to change. But there are many other factors at play in Wales, which could mean that the makeup of seats in the Welsh Parliament could look very different by the time the final votes are counted compared to 2016. Thomas Morgan, BBC News, outside the Senedd.
And we will have more about the elections later in the programme, but 18 minutes past 1, just a reminder of our top story. A crushing defeat for Labour as the Conservatives sweep to victory in the Hartlepool by-election with a majority of nearly 7,000. The Prime Minister says it's a good result.
Very encouraging set of results so far, and I think that's really because we've been focusing as government on our priorities, people's priorities.
Stay with us on the BBC News channel for all the election results still to come across Scotland, Wales and England, and analysis of what they mean from our team of experts.
People under the age of 40 are to be offered an alternative COVID vaccine to AstraZeneca in what's being called a precautionary move. Public health and vaccine experts are stressing there are no new safety concerns about the jab, after data had showed it was linked to very rare blood clots. Previously, the approach had applied to people only under 30. Our health correspondent Jim Reid reports.
The vaccination programme is now working well, helping to reduce deaths, hospital admissions and COVID infections. As the NHS moves down the age groups, though, the advice is changing. Government scientists had already said those under 30 would be offered an alternative to the AstraZeneca vaccine because of the risk of very rare blood clots. Now they say that offer is being extended by another 10 years to all those under 40.
The purpose of the advice is really to improve vaccine confidence, if anything, because the advice puts a high priority on safety. And we're trying to demonstrate that we are rigorously assessing the situation, and where appropriate, we will advise accordingly.
The risk of a blood clot linked to the AstraZeneca jab is very small, with just 242 cases out of 28 million doses given. The risk is slightly higher in younger age groups, which explains the change.
On current plans, our vaccine supply schedule will support the change offered by the JCVI without limiting the speed and scale of the vaccine rollout. I do expect that we are still on target to offer a first dose to all adults by the end of July.
This comes as the overall number of COVID cases continues to fall. Scientists, though, are still watching for any mutations or variants of the virus that might emerge. Public Health England has now reclassified a version first detected in India as an official variant of concern. Scientists think it's at least as transmissible as the so-called Kent variant, which is dominant here, though there is no evidence it makes our current vaccines any less effective. 520 cases have been detected so far in this country, with many linked to international travel.
I think it is so important to emphasise that being vaccinated makes you so much safer, even if these variants are circulating. They do reduce the severity, they reduce hospitalisations, and they prevent people from dying.
The message from scientists is for younger people to take the jab, not just to protect themselves, but others too, as society slowly unlocks from this year-long pandemic. Jim Reid, BBC News.
Well, the government is expected to release its green list of overseas travel destinations later this afternoon. It'll mean that after May the 17th, people in England will be able to visit those countries without having to quarantine when they return. Let's find out more from our transport correspondent, Caroline Davis. This is something many people are watching, Caroline.
Yes, a huge amount of anticipation about this announcement. Just to bear in mind, we are currently just talking about England. We haven't had confirmation from Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland about when international travel will restart. This is about what happens when you get back to England having been abroad, depending on the country you've been in. So that is based on the traffic light system. Let's have a look through the colours. To start with, if the country you're travelling from is red, that means you will have to pay to quarantine when you get back to England. So, for example, India was added to that list recently. The second is amber. That means that you would have to quarantine at home, and that's at the moment what the vast majority of countries are designated as. The green list would be new from the 17th of May. That would mean that you wouldn't need to quarantine at all, although you would still need to take 2 tests, one before you travel back to England and one when you arrive. Of course, the green list is really important for the industry because the easier international travel is, the more they hope passengers will book and feel confident in being able to go abroad. We don't know which countries are currently on the green list yet. When we do find out later this afternoon, the key thing to look at is not just the fact that you don't have to quarantine coming back, but what does the country on that list require you to do to go and visit? Are they open for British travellers in the first place? We'll find out more at 5 o'clock this afternoon.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Caroline Davis. The second of 2 Royal Navy ships sent to Jersey to keep watch over dozens of French fishing boats is returning to port. Yesterday, French vessels gathered outside the harbour at St Helier in a protest about Brexit fishing rights. Robert Hall is in Jersey this lunchtime. Bring us right up to date, Robert.
Yes, well, we perhaps thought that things would settle down after yesterday and the talks that took place. The situation has now moved, the emphasis, if you like, to Guernsey. The BBC's seen emails from the manager of the Cherbourg fish market. It's known as Crier. That is where a lot of Channel Island fishermen take their fish, and that email is warning fishermen from Guernsey not to try and land fish in Cherbourg for their own safety. It goes on to say that the market has been warned by fishermen over in France that if Channel Island catches are brought ashore, they will be destroyed, in the words of the emails. That's caused great upset in Guernsey, which is due to introduce its own licensing system next month. So they are now saying, well, if that's going to happen, why should we not also take a firm line, as has Jersey, over our borders? So that's perhaps a not very hopeful sign. What about here? Well, this is the harbour where the talks took place yesterday. We saw the French boats on their way out of harbour. The optimism in Jersey is somewhat tempered by what we're hearing from France, which is that fishermen returned home satisfied that they had made a show, that they'd made their protest known, but there's a lot of progress still to be made.
Robert Hall, thank you. More than 100 firefighters are tackling a blaze at a block of flats in East London. The fire has spread through parts of the 8th, 9th and 10th floors. Our correspondent Tom Simons is at the scene. Tom, what's happening?
Well, Jane, the firefighting operation is now over. In fact, they got this fire under control by about 11 o'clock. It started at 9 o'clock. You can see behind me the damage is just 3 floors, the 8th, 9th and 10th floors of this block in New Providence Wharf. But don't be fooled by what this seems to be. This was a big fire, according to firefighters. They had to take 2 people to hospital suffering from smoke inhalation, and 38 adults and children were treated at the scene for shock and the effects of inhaling smoke. Now, the big concern here is that this block has the kind of cladding, flammable cladding, which was used at Grenfell Tower. Residents groups have told me that in fact the cladding was due to be removed 3.5 years after the Grenfell Tower fire, and that work was due to start in the next week or so. And they are concerned, obviously, at what has happened here, and say that there shouldn't be delays to this sort of work, and that this is the proof of what can happen if this sort of issue is left to continue. But the scene is under control. As you say, a very large turnout from the London Fire Brigade has got this fire under control.
Tom Simons, thank you. Now, as promised, let's hear the latest about the elections. The latest picture comes again from Lewis Goodall.
Yes, Jane, let's just have a quick look at this here. This is the state of the parties in the English councils. Take a look at this. You wouldn't normally expect to see this sort of picture in the 11th year of a Conservative government. The Conservatives gaining 67 councillors, Labour down 74. The 11th year of a Conservative government, you'd expect that to be inverted, for Labour to be advancing, and yet they're not. Quite the contrary, they're actually going backwards. Let's have a look at some of that in a bit more detail. Same picture everywhere we look throughout England. In Dudley, Conservatives up 12, Labour down 11. Nuneaton and Bedworth, also in the Midlands, 10, Conservatives up 10, Labour down 10. Harlow, these all seat councils the Conservatives gained overnight, by the way. Conservatives up 7, Labour down 7. It's a uniform picture that we're seeing in more and more of the country. As I was saying earlier, the old UKIP or Brexit Party vote being absorbed into the Conservative Party, a realignment on the right, if you like. No vote on all the votes at the same time being split on the left, with still the Liberal Democrats and the Greens and Labour and so on. And there is little that they can do to stand in this path. And as I say, what an extraordinary situation to be in. The 11th year of a Conservative government, the Conservatives advancing, almost achieving hegemonic status in much of England. One more result that's just come in, by the way, up in Scotland. We're starting to get some of those results in now from Scotland in Aberdeen Donside. Looks like, actually, although it's a safe SNP seat, there's actually been quite a decent swing of about 7% or so to the Conservatives. That will give, even though it's a safe SNP seat, if that is replicated in other parts of the country, in other parts of North East Scotland, the Conservatives will feel very content about that. The SNP very disappointed. Very exciting set of elections and results still to come, Jane.
Thanks for now, Lewis Goodall, and let's get some final thoughts from Adam Fleming. Good few hours to go yet, Adam.
Yeah, but it really matters what happens in these hours for a few reasons. It matters because the people we're electing run the services that are quite close to our lives. It matters because it shows that Boris Johnson and the Conservatives have alighted on a winning recipe that has now worked in multiple elections. It matters because it now looks like the Labour Party might be on the verge of something like a civil war. And if Keir Starmer has to win an argument in his party, that's less time for him to win an argument in the country. However, I wonder wonder if all of this will pale into insignificance tomorrow lunchtime if we get a result from the Scottish Parliament that puts the country on course for another Scottish independence referendum, which could put the country on course for the breakup of the United Kingdom. And that would be something we'll be spending a lot of time talking about.
Adam, for now, thank you, Adam Fleming. And as we say, results coming in the coming hours, the coming days. You can get live coverage and expert analysis of what all the results mean for all of us on the BBC News website and on the app. Right now, let's take a breath, take a look at the weather prospects. Here's Nick Miller.
Hi Jane, it's another sunshine and showers day out there today. Here's a big downpour that developed earlier off the coast of North Yorkshire. It is speckled cloud on the satellite picture where the showers have developed so far today. As ever, some of us will escape them and stay dry. Very few, though, will escape the rain coming in from this massive cloud waiting in the Atlantic. Low pressure driving it in just in time for the start of the weekend, but really changing our weather pattern. Gone will be the cold northerly. Warmer winds coming up from the south, but don't confuse this colour with a lot of sunshine this weekend. Of that, there will not be very much. But there are some sunny spells out there today around the showers, particularly across the north and east of the UK. It looks like the heaviest ones this afternoon, eastern Scotland down through northeast England, Yorkshire and into Lincolnshire. Some heavy with hail, thunder, wintry on hills. Fewer showers South Wales and southern England with the higher temperatures today. But out of the sun, it does of course feel quite cold. The showers continue into this evening before fading, but, well, you can't miss it, can you? Here comes the rain tonight from that area of low pressure. Ahead of that, still cold enough, clear enough, Scotland, northern and eastern England for a touch of frost, though these are the temperatures first thing. They are slowly creeping up. But here's tomorrow's weather. Heavy rain spreading northwards as the day goes on. Difficult travel conditions within that area of rain. Clearing Northern Ireland, turning drier and brighter in the afternoon. The rain in Scotland not reaching the Northern Isles until the evening, and parts of southern Scotland turning drier, along with a large part of southern and eastern England. But it's still raining even at this stage in northern England and Wales. It's windier too. These are average speeds, gusts 30 to 40 miles per hour. And although that milder area is moving in, not yet into Scotland, another cold day, even some snow still on the higher hills. And even into tomorrow evening, it's still raining in Wales, and parts of South Wales into the Brecon Beacons could see over 100 millimetres of rain before this is done, so that could cause some disruption. And after a cloudy Saturday night, I want to show you the temperatures first thing Sunday, on a par with the temperatures we've had by day in the past week. So we'll feel very different on Sunday morning, but look how close low pressure is still close by for the second part of the weekend. And close to that in Northern Ireland and Scotland, showers, a few sunny spells, an area of cloud and patchy rain in England and Wales slowly moving east, but warm sunny spells could lift temperatures into the low 20s in southeast England and East Anglia before the chance of thunderstorms later in the day. There is a Met Office weather warning for that rain in South Wales. Look at the details online. It is all changed this weekend, Jane.
All right, thank you very much, Nick Miller. Just a reminder now of our top story. There's been a crushing defeat for Labour as the Conservatives sweep to victory in the Hartlepool by-election with a majority of nearly 7,000. The Prime Minister says it's a good result.
Very encouraging set of results so far, and I think that's really because we've been focusing as government on our priorities, people's priorities.
And a reminder, the government's due to announce that travel list at 5. You can follow that on the BBC News channel. But from the 1 o'clock news team, goodbye from all of us. Let's join our news teams now wherever you are in the country. Bye-bye.